Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this edition of The Insight. I am Babile Jonathan, and we are coming to you from our headquarters in Cameroon's economic capital, Douala. Today, we are looking at the evolution of the security crisis in the northwest and southwest regions of the country and its spillover effects in other regions of the country, notably the west region, which is close to one of the regions, the northwest region of the Republic of Cameroon. Earlier this week, armed men said to be separatist fighters stormed a market in Bamenyam, a locality in Galim subdivision in the Bambutus division west region of the country, killing 9 persons, injuring several others, destroying homes, looting businesses, and stealing motorcycles. Several persons are said to have been kidnapped during that assault on the population of Birmingham in the west region of the country, and later a wave of panic swept across Galim and Buda, which are 2 subdivisions in the Bambutus division in Buda. Information went viral on social media of an alleged planned separatist attack in that part of the west region of the country, and panic caused some schools to shut down as parents rushed to the schools to take their children home, while in Galim several schools did not go operational because of 2 vehicles that were found burnt down by unidentified persons, and it was attributed to separatist fighters from the northwest region of the country. We'll be looking, of course, at the way out of this situation that's been pulling on for more than 6 years now in the crisis-stricken northwest and southwest regions of the country. Stay with us and meet our guest in some few seconds. Our guest is Dr. Simon MUNZU. He is a federalist joining us from the United States of America. He is a former spokesperson of the All Anglophone or the General Anglophone Conference, which late Christian Cardinal Toomey and other persons wanted to organize, but it never took place. It was never organized due to what was qualified as resistance from the authorities, the central administrative authorities in Yaoundé. Dr. Simon MUNZU, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mr. Babila. Thank you for having me.
Right. What's your opinion about the unfolding of the armed conflict in the northwest and southwest regions of the country? It's been going on for close to 7 years now.
Well, I mean, since the beginning of this crisis in 2016, my position has been clear, and everyone knows that my preference is for a quick end to this war, which is now in its 7th year, meaning evidently that the appeals that some of us made, both within Cameroon and outside Cameroon, or from outside Cameroon, for the belligerents to end hostilities have not been listened to. So obviously, if there is no peace, then we can expect an escalation in hostilities. And so the incidents that you are mentioning, if indeed they are confirmed to have happened, are clearly an indication that we are far from the end of the conflict.
All right. For the past 6 years, the situation has practically not changed, even though authorities have been talking about a gradual move towards peace and normalcy in the crisis-stricken regions, but of recent, several atrocities have been recorded, including the Egbeko massacre in Manfred Central, southwest region of the Republic of Cameroon, and such incidents have been going on, have been recorded year after year for close to 7 years now. What's your perspective? What's your analysis of the direction that this crisis is taking? Is it, are we moving towards a solution as the authorities have been saying?
Well, I mean, we definitely are not moving to a resolution of the conflict, Mr. Babila. I think any one of us can see that. When two sides are in armed conflict, the restoration of peace does not come through the declaration, the statements of one side or the other. If there is going to be peace, it's important that the belligerents engage in a peace process that begins with a dialogue that would eventually lead the parties to sit around the table and agree on terms on which to end the hostilities. And that exactly is what everyone has been clamoring for. Everyone has been urging the government and its forces on the one hand, and the separatist armed groups on the other, to engage in a peace process. We all witnessed how initially the Swiss government, working through some of its well-known Swiss civil society organizations, fought hard to bring the two forces, the two sides, the opposing camps, to the table in what was referred to as the Swiss process. After about 2 years of going around in circles, that process crashed, as it were. And of course, everyone was frustrated when that happened. But we all had some hope when, at the beginning of this year, it was announced that the Canadians had worked together with the government and the separatist groups to agree on the modalities for engaging an active peace process in which Canada was to act as facilitator or mediator. But again, when that was announced and we all it raised our hopes that there will be the beginning of a process of ending the crisis, within 72 to 96 hours, the government announced that it was not a party to any process whatsoever, and that Canada had not been mandated to intervene or facilitate. And the result is that there is nothing happening, neither inside Cameroon nor outside Cameroon, in terms of a peace process. So how, in those circumstances, can the government claim that we are moving towards peace, or for that matter, that we are moving towards the normalization of things, normalization of life in the Northwest and Southwest regions? So once again, I'm saying that it is not enough for the government to make claims about the restoration of peace. Nor would it be enough for the separatists to make such a claim if they were to make such a claim. The rest of us are there. We observe the reality. There are people who feel the reality in their villages, on their farms, in their markets, and elsewhere. It is clear to everyone that there is no peace yet in the northwest and southwest regions.
Among those who spearheaded the initiative for the organization of an all-Anglophone conference with late Christian Cardinal Tumi, and it never worked. Now there are calls. One of such calls coming from Barrister Tamfu Richard calls for an urgent organization of that conference. An urgent call. He says that it is very urgent, it is crucial for all Anglophones to come together at this point in an all-Anglophone conference or a general Anglophone conference, whatever it may be called. First of all, let's go back a little bit to see why it failed. Why you, Christian Cardinal Tumi, Eli Smith, and other people couldn't organize that come together of Anglophones.
Well, it's interesting to hear that Barrister Tamfu is issuing a call for the organizing of an Anglophone conference. Now, but what does he intend to do about it, or how does he intend to proceed? Because we have to get out of an unending circle or cycle of chorus. When are we going to go beyond chorus and actually engage action towards what the objective that we seek? If it is to hold an Anglophone conference, it's not sufficient to call for one. Now, Mr. Babila, the need for Anglophones to meet is a long-standing one, and it is well recognized. So at this point in time, it is not sufficient for anyone to issue a call for Anglophones to meet or for an Anglophone meeting. That is a necessity, and everyone knows that. Why is it a necessity? There is an Anglophone problem in Cameroon, and it has been there virtually since our two territories came together in 1961. So it's only, if you like, an imbecile who would deny the reality of the Anglophone problem in Cameroon. And if there is a problem, there is a need for a solution. And with regards to the Anglophone problem, we have consistently suggested that you are not going to solve that problem without having a national conference on the Anglophone problem. There has to be a national conference on the Anglophone problem, whether in the context of a conference that is devoted exclusively to the Anglophone problem, or in the context of a conference that is called to examine the problems of governance in Cameroon as a whole, because there are problems of governance in Cameroon as a whole. And within that general conference on Cameroonian governance as a whole, we devote a major segment to examining and propounding solutions to the Anglophone problem. So it is a necessity to have a national conference on the Anglophone problem. However, it is also clear that towards that goal, before you get to a national conference on the Anglophone problem, Anglophones amongst themselves need to meet to prepare their position to take to that conference. Okay? And why is that necessary? This is necessary because since 1972, with the division of what used to be the West Cameroon into the so-called Northwest Province, now region, and the Southwest Province, now region, there isn't any institution, there isn't any authority that is common to both the Northwest and Southwest, where you can say that this authority, which is common to North and Southwest, speaks for the Northwest and Southwest. Right? When we had a government in Buea, you could say that anything concerning West Cameroon would be handled by that government. When we had a national assembly, when we had an assembly in Buea for West Cameroon, you could say that anything concerning West Cameroon would be handled by or through that assembly. But since 1972, there is not a single institution that is common to the Northwest and the Southwest. Therefore, when there is a need for the Northwest and Southwest to meet to resolve a common problem, a mechanism has to be found for them, the people of those two regions, to get together. Hence, the need for a preparatory meeting of Anglophones to get ready to engage with the government in Yaoundé on solving the Anglophone problem. It is from this perspective that we advocated at the beginning of this crisis in 2016, early 2017, we advocated exactly that we should have a national conference on the Anglophone problem, but that it should be preceded by a preparatory meeting amongst Anglophones. And it is this idea which I took to various quarters seeking the convening of an Anglophone General Conference that eventually led to Cardinal Tumi, the moderator of the PCC, the Imam of the Central Mosque in Bamenda, the Imam of the Central Mosque in Buea, and we had at some stage gotten the assurances of the participation of the executive president of the Cameroon Baptist Convention, and so on. Mr. Babila, the history is there. The facts are there. The documents are there. And the witnesses are there in terms of the people whom I've called, with the exception of the late cardinal, who is no longer with us today, but the other people who I've called are there as witnesses to show that I am the one
Doctor,
who
just to
brought them together to accept to be the conveners of the Anglophone General Conference. And when they accepted to do that, and they invited me to head the organizing committee, I accepted that role. And so we launched the process. But the initiative was opposed by the government on one side but even more ferociously by the separatists. Okay? And that explains why it was stifled. Now, I can assure you that if we had gone on as Anglophones to hold an Anglophone General Conference as it was proposed then, in 2018, 5 years ago, the ground would have been laid for a constructive engagement with the government of Yaoundé to resolve the Anglophone problem.
Okay, Dr. Simon MUNZU, what is needed now? What is needed now for that conference to hold? If you so
exists, how should we proceed? So I'm happy to hear that Barrister Tamfu, for one, is calling on this to happen. But as I said earlier, let's not limit ourselves to issuing calls. If Barrister Tamfu and anybody else so minded, if we're all serious, then it's important that a critical mass of actors come together and effectively engage a project, I would call it a project, for bringing Anglophones together in a conference in which they will prepare their position with which to engage the government. And when I say Anglophones, we recognize the disparity of differences of opinion, of position, and so on within the Anglophone community, Northwest and Southwest, those who are federalists, those who say they are in favor of the unitary state, those who are for separation, and so on. Now, we need to sit somewhere at some point, examine all these options that are on the table, and at the end of the day, agree on something. And it is that something that will serve as the platform on which to engage with the authorities in Yaoundé if we are to have a peaceful resolution of this problem. So, I mean, I can only wish Mr. Tamfu well, but I would invite him to go beyond making a call and put forth concrete proposals if he has any.
The question now is, what is needed for another attempt not to fail? What is needed for that conference to hold now?
Well, as I said earlier, the biggest problem facing the Anglophones in Cameroon is that they do not have any representative institution that speaks for them, acts for them, promotes their interests as a matter of vocation, of duty, of responsibility, of the mandate. They don't have. We don't have such an institution. Therefore, anything that is to be done requires that the population engage. Anglophones have to take an interest in what is happening in their country, and specifically in what is happening to them, and say, we cannot just sit on the sideline as if we are witnesses or members in an audience watching a play unfold in front of us, or in a stadium watching a game being played in front of us. No. What is happening in the Northwest and the Southwest? Where are our chiefs? Where are our political leaders? Where are our moral leaders in terms of the church leaders of all denominations? Where are all these youth whom we rightly ought to consider as the Cameroon of tomorrow? What are they saying with respect to how this conflict is affecting them. What are traditional rulers, if they say that they are the natural, God-given rulers of the people? What are they saying? What are they doing when all this is happening to their subjects, to their population? The leaders of the Catholic Church, the leaders of the Presbyterian Church, the leaders of the Cameroon Baptist Convention in the Northwest and Southwest, the leaders of the Muslim communities in the Northwest and Southwest, civil society organizations in the Northwest and Southwest. Why is everybody sitting on the fence? Because as long as you continue to sit on the fence, the solution is not going to come. Don't expect that Yaoundé, that is responsible through its system of governance for the marginalization, domination, subjugation, assimilation of Anglophones, is the one that's going to take the initiative on its own to find a solution. But Mr. Babila, to your question, I don't see any answer other than the population of the Northern and Southwest, taking into account all those components that I have mentioned, waking up to the reality that there is a problem and that they have to participate in looking for a solution. So there has to be mobilization. I'm sure that if there was to be a mobilization of these components of Cameroonian Anglophone society inside and outside Cameroon, the Yaoundé regime will see that these people are actually up to fight against the injustice to which they have been subjected all this while, to fight by peaceful means, and Yaoundé will be forced to react.
You are a federalist. Later in the program, we'll take a look at the federal solution. We'll take a look at the federal perspective of the solution. First of all, we're going to take a look at what we are taking a look at what the newspapers reported this week in Cameroon. The press review. With the Guardian Post, the English-speaking daily or the English language daily newspaper reports the spilling over of the Anglophone crisis into the west region of Cameroon. It exclaims suspected Amber fighters spill blood in the west region again. The armed men attacked a market in Bamenyam village in the Galim subdivision in the Bambutus division, where 9 persons were shot dead, several others injured, some persons reportedly kidnapped, houses destroyed, businesses looted, and motorcycles stolen. Municipal update says government goes tough as Amber fighters killed 9 persons in Bamenyam. And of course, you have that story in municipal updates. Another newspaper calls for the talks about parliamentarians calling for the Defense Commission. That is, the call came from parliamentarians who are demanding for greater solutions or better still. Cameroon Tribune highlights the call for higher security measures to address the security challenges in different parts of the country, especially in the crisis-hit regions. The call came from parliamentarians, members of the Security and National Defense Commission of the National Assembly during a working session with officials of the Ministry of Territorial Administration. Southwest chiefs want government to change strategy on Anglophone crisis. The Post reports that after condemning gruesome killings in the northwest and southwest regions, notably the Mamfe massacre. Traditional authorities of the southwest region urged government to review its strategy with regards to the resolution of the Anglophone crisis. On the front page of Cameroon Insider, members of parliament push for more resources and political will to boost the fight against corruption. Municipal update: Ndian Senior Divisional Officer delivers President Paul Biya's support to vigilante groups in the southwest region. Vigilante groups in the southwest region received some equipment and financial aid said to have been given by the President of the Republic for the fight against insecurity in that administrative unit. The Horizon newspaper talks about a scandal, a sexual scandal in Kumba in the southwest region of the country, and the paper exclaims, Kumba sex scandal, accused found guilty. Newswatch: political battle in the northwest will be tough, governor tells CPDM Secretary General Jean Kwete. The governor of the Northwest region is reported here to have told the Secretary General of the CPDM, the Cameroon People's Democratic Movement, Jean Kwete, that the political battle, notably with regards to the upcoming elections in 2025, will be tough in the northwest region of the country. The Guardian Post newspaper: Cabral Libi in trouble as leadership tussle rocks the Cameroon Party for National Reconciliation. The tussle between Cabral Libi, present leader of that political party, and the founder is said to be putting Cabral Libi in a difficult position and casting doubts over him being a candidate in the presidential candidate in the 2025 presidential election in Cameroon. Another issue of the Guardian Post newspaper: the 2025 presidential election. Ninche crusades come to lead coalition to challenge Paul Biya. This information in the Guardian Post newspaper is suggesting that the Honorable Member of Parliament, Jean-Michel Ninche, president of the FCC political party, a new political party, is crusading for a come-to-led coalition to unseat President Paul Biya, and the paper is celebrating its 22 years of resilience. And another issue of the Guardian Post newspaper says that the Ministry of Finance has released or announced 96 billion francs CFA for teachers' grievances, the teachers who have been in strike in Cameroon. The Guardian Post newspaper, in another issue, says South Region Energy Minister launches solar project to boost electricity supply nationwide. Now on to another issue of Cameroon Tribune. Deadlines will be respected in the rehabilitation of the Nachtigal hydroelectric power plant. This is information made public by Cameroon Tribune, indicating that the deadlines as far as the rehabilitation of the Nachtigal hydroelectric power plant will be respected. We will now wrap up with municipal updates. To enhance development, government secures 560 billion francs CFA from the World Bank. And that's it for the press review. We are still with our guest, Dr. Simon MUNZU, joining us from the United States of America. Dr. Simon MUNZU, what's your take on the spilling over of the Anglophone crisis to other parts of the country, notably the West region? The Guardian Post reported the killing of about 9 persons. Killing of 9 persons in Bamenyame village in Galim subdivision in the Bambutus division, West region of the country, by alleged separatist fighters who are said to have crossed over from the northwest region to attack a market in that locality.
Well, Mr. Babila, as you say, this appears to have been done by what you call alleged separatist fighters. Because part of the trouble we have in the context of this crisis is that we don't even have reliable mechanisms from which to obtain good, accurate information. When an incident happens, we have those who impute it, ascribe it to separatists. We have separatists denying that it is they who carried out the operation. And at the end of the day, we citizens are at a loss as to what are the true facts of the situation. And so we cannot speak confidently with respect to who carried out these attacks in the localities in the West region to which you refer, and which you rightly qualify as alleged separatists. But having said that, if these acts are indeed the action of separatists, then obviously it marks an escalation, a worsening of the armed conflict, because that would point to the spread, the territorial, geographical spread of the conflict, which until now has been confined to the northwest and southwest regions. But if separatists begin to make incursions into the west region, then of course that marks an escalation in the conflict, a worsening of the conflict, spreading it to other parts, other regions of the country. And that could well be because haven't we heard, you and I listening to videos and audios coming from the separatist camp, we have heard separatist leaders, notably someone like Chris Anu, repeatedly urge their fighters to take action into what they call enemy territory, meaning the other 8 regions of our country. Now, such an intent is a declaration of war on the other 9 regions, the other 8 regions, by separatists. So, are we to interpret these incidents to which you refer as being the effective or the commencement of implementation of the scheme outlined by the separatist leaders such as Chris Anu and others? If that is so, then indeed it just represents a worsening of the situation. And let us also not forget that both in the northwest and southwest regions, and also now in the west regions, if indeed the conflict has spread there, the objective of the separatists is not to win the war, because I'm sure they themselves must be aware of the fact that, as some of us have been saying to them from the beginning, based on our analysis of their military capability, they don't have what it takes to win the war. They don't have what it takes to win the war. But I suppose their intention is not, or their aspiration is not to win the war. It is, as they themselves continuously say, speaking through their leaders, it is to render the territory ungovernable by creating panic in the minds of the population. If they attack a locality on a market day, they sow fear into people who will not be looking forward to the next market day for fear that they might be attacked again. If they strike a school, there is still fear into students and teachers and school administrators who will not look forward to going to school. This is terrorism at its most basic. Let's call it that. That's what it is. And so it may well be that the separatists, in their strategy, have decided that they are going to take their tactics of terrorizing the population, of making life difficult for the population. They're going to take that to the neighboring regions, Francophone regions that are neighboring to the Anglophone regions of the North and Southwest, and obviously the most obvious is the West. So this is a troubling new development, and but it also underlines the urgency to sit down and negotiate an end to the crisis. And I would therefore continue to urge the parties, the government and the separatists, to put an end to the suffering of the population, which has lasted too long already, 7 years and counting. Recognize that neither of them is going to defeat the other anytime soon. Therefore, there is no need to continue to fight, because the only consequence of continuing to fight is more suffering for the population. The government has to accept that the time has come for it to sit down and engage a genuine peace process with the separatists, and that will be to end the war. But once the war has been ended, that same government has to engage in a genuine national dialogue, a genuine national conference to resolve the governance issues that are plaguing Cameroon today, foremost of which is the Anglophone problem. I heard you in the press review that you just concluded. I hear parliamentarians calling for.
Right, Dr. Simon MUNZU, you mentioned panic, and there was eventually panic in the Buda and also in Galim, two subdivisions in the Bambutus division. In Buda, information went viral on social media that there was going to be a separatist attack in that part of the West region, and that persons were going to be kidnapped and so on. And it created panic, parents running to schools to take their children back home, and several schools had to shut down. While in Galim, because of two vehicles that were found burned to ashes, several schools did not open, and students couldn't go on with academic activities because of that wave of panic that went across the two subdivisions of the Bambutus division. What's your analysis of this?
Sorry, what did you ask? Because there is so much noise coming from your end there, from your studio. Mr. Babila, did you ask a question at the end of your comment?
Yes, doctor, if you can hear me, I'm talking about the wave of panic that went across Bambutu's division, notably two subdivisions in Buda and in Galim, connected to the armed conflict in the northwest and southwest regions. In Buda, information went viral on social media that there was going to be an attack by separatists and that persons were going to be kidnapped. And because of that information, parents rushed to schools to take their children back home. Schools had to close down and academic activities were interrupted. There was some kind of commotion in the town. While in Galim, two vehicles were found early in the morning, burnt down, and the arson attack was attributed to secessionists, and this created panic all over the place. What's your analysis of this?
Well, I mean, that just reinforces the point I was making earlier, that what we may be seeing is the implementation of a strategy that consists in simply sowing fear in the hearts and minds of the population, with a view to quote unquote rendering the territory ungovernable. So these are typical actions of, if you like, insurgent forces when they know that they cannot engage the opposing military openly in a battle with lines, identifiable battle lines. They resort to acts of terrorism, which consist in creating a psychosis of panic amongst the population. So this obviously is the new tactic that separatists are adopting, and we know how difficult it is to fight that kind of enemy in an asymmetric war that this is becoming, because you don't know when they will strike, you don't know what targets they will choose at a particular moment. You are required to be, if you're going to confront them, you are required to be constantly on the alert in practically every social institution, schools, churches, markets, and so on. Something which they know the government, not just that of Cameroon, but any government and its forces, cannot possibly post a gendarme or a policeman or a soldier everywhere. So there will be soft targets which separatists adopting these tactics would want to strike, if only from time to time, but to maintain a sense of permanent insecurity amongst the population. And that's all they want, just create that sense, paralyze activities and so on. So this is not a phase of the quote unquote war that we would want to see engaged, because it becomes very difficult to deal with that kind of insurgency. But at the end of the day, once again, at the end of the day, the urgency is in respect of ending the conflict. And it is very easy to end this conflict if only there were political will to address the root causes of the conflict. Because after all, what is the root cause of the conflict, Mr. Babila? It's very simple. Other people are pretending not to be aware of it or hesitating in admitting it. The root cause is very simple. In Cameroon, in the past 61 years, 62 years, we have had a system of governance started by President Ahidjo, perfected under President Biya, whose central element is to marginalize Anglophones, dominate them, subjugate them, assimilate them, get rid of the system that they brought into the Union with Francophone Cameroon in 1961. In other words, annihilate, abolish their own heritage. That is the core of the problem. And it can be addressed very easily, first by being admitted. Those who are running the government in Yaoundé have to admit that there is a problem. And in fact, they do, when it suits them, they show signs that they have admitted, But then, having admitted, they refuse to do the right thing. You acknowledge that there's a problem, apply an effective solution. Instead, they prefer to apply these cosmetic solutions. For example, the creation of the so-called Commission for Bilingualism and Multiculturalism. That commission was created in the wake of the assertion by Anglophones that there was a language problem, a cultural problem affecting them. The government said, okay, in response to that, we create a bilingualism and multiculturalism commission. But without giving that commission the kind of mandate that would allow it in its operations to respond specifically to the nature of the problem. So it became just a cosmetic measure. Similarly, the government claims to have created a so-called common law section at ENAM, a so-called common law bench at the Supreme Court.
Doctor, we are going to take some interviews now. We are going to take some interviews now. We'll be right back in a moment to take a look at the federal solution to the decades-old Anglophone problem.
Security, well, it's not the best because we see all these young people. Mamu is the end of Boyasob division, bounded with Equinoxe, which is Boyuka. So we cannot say we feel free here. Things are so dear.
The vaccine is something new. Yes, this vaccine has been developed in 1987, and they started clinical trials by 2019, and all of those trials we can have a summary of the work saying that we have about 68% efficacy. I don't really know what they did before deciding, because it's a serious, crucial decision, but I hope so. I really hope measures were taken to verify, to be sure that these vaccines are not dangerous for them.
For me, I'm really scared. Honestly, I'm really scared. They should give us assurance of such vaccine. I don't know what the outcome.
What happened in Liberia will greatly contribute in eroding the idea that always made the notion of democracy in Africa to sound like a cruel oxymoron. the world had gotten used to elections-related conflicts on the continent that often reinforced stories evoking horrifying images of widespread social, economic, and political degradation of an African continent that is so diverse and so complex. Many African countries sit tight autocratic leaders under the tag of their achievements, and great visions have taken their countries hostage for too long, especially those of the Central African region. The unfortunate thing is that sit-tightism, under the pretext of accomplishments, is like a house of cards, and the longer these leaders hold firm to their seats, their houses of cards eventually crumble and their achievements go up in flames. So the one important lesson that we can learn from the outcome of the Liberian election is that, contrary to popular belief, Africa can reverse course and institutionalize stable democratic governments by changing leaders and public mentalities. In his concession speech, President George Weah reassured observers of African politics that the winner-take-all practice in African political competitions that has often been responsible for the elimination of any opposition as well as any political competition subsequent to elections is now outdated. And by declaring his willingness to assist the president-elect in building a prosperous nation, he reminded the new government of the fact that the basic rule of the democracy game is that the winners do not forever dislodge the losers. President Weah's courageous call on his supporters to continue to believe in the Liberian electoral system is an inevitable step for the consolidation of democracy. This is the kind of practice that should be fostered on the African continent.
Right, welcome back. Dr. Simon MUNZU, you are a federalist, and a survey recently carried out by the coalition of federalist groups and movements indicated that a great majority of Cameroonians want federalism.
Federalism is the solution for the Cameroon of tomorrow. I mean, this is not an arrogant statement. This is not a statement made out of a sense of pomposity or whatever, but it proceeds from a careful analysis of the state of our country as we move forward. In the 60 years or slightly more since reunification in 1961 and the creation of a united country, initially called the Federal Republic of Cameroon, we have been governed essentially by autocracy. First, there was the autocratic regime of President Ahidjo, and by that I mean a regime in which power is concentrated in the hands of one man, called the President of the Republic. He is said to be the incarnation of the institutions of the Republic. He is given power to appoint without consultation, arbitrarily if necessary, but he is given power to appoint to all civilian and military posts, including the judiciary. He is, in the specific instance of Cameroon, under both Ahidjo and now, and for more than 40 years, Biya, that same person is the national chairman of the ruling party in the country. So, since reunification, we Cameroonians in all the today, what we call today 10 regions, in all the 10 regions, we have been governed through an autocratic regime. The rule of one man, supported by those to whom he appoints to rule with him. Now, as we move towards a transition from a regime, because 2025 is not far, so if Cameroonians, if that is their will, they could go to the polls in 2025 and elect someone else. So there could be a change of regime in 2025. But there is also the fact that even in terms of age, President Biya is more than 90 years old. And when you are 90 years old and more, even in our families, the patriarch who is 90 years old in our families does not exercise that much governance over his family. He sits and watches his sons and daughters, grandsons and granddaughters run the show. They come and they consult him. But he, even in a family setting, in any of our families, our grandpa who is 90 years plus, nobody in our family expects him to be dynamic enough, strong enough, engaged enough, clear-headed enough to run the family affairs. No. And that is not considered as a curse. It's not considered as an insult. That is just the way it is. We give him all the respect in the family, but when it comes to moving around to do things, we recognize that on account of age, there's nothing more that we can expect of him. If that can happen, if that is the situation with our families, how much more our national family, Cameroon? So you don't have to be an enemy, an opponent of President Biya to acknowledge the fact that at his age today, nothing much can be expected from him in terms of effective governance. And what is happening now is that people around him are, from various angles, doing their own thing and claiming to be acting on his instructions. The result is a cacophony that we find today in the functioning of government. So, we are,
we have exhausted our time. Thank you so much for joining us in this edition of The Insight. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us. You can follow the rebroadcast of this program on Friday at 5 p.m. You can also follow us on our YouTube channel and on Facebook. Thank you so much for your time. Goodbye.